Welcome to Beyond the Fundamentals video. We're talking about in mature relationships, negotiations are explicit. And that's really not the best title. A better title, it's just hard to cram everything into the right title. The whole right title would be something like in relationships with mature people, negotiations are explicit. Because if we're defining the relationship to be mature might be the relationship itself is older or more mature. But what I really want to convey here is in relationships between mature people, negotiations are explicit. Now, I had some things I wanted to talk about anyway, but it just so happens that some of the feedback that I got back from the other video we did, why you should get a prenup, that feedback. Here, I'll show you the video title there. It's very important to watch that video because I say a lot of people react just to the title. You know, Jesus said, man, marriage is one man, one woman for life, and all this kind of stuff. They're just reacting to the title without watching the video. But I promise you, in that video, I say a bunch of things that you've never thought of before. And you need to watch that video and consider those things. And I got some feedback from the video, which is great because the feedback helps me understand what I'm not communicating clearly or what I need to fill in more. Got Alana on board too. Welcome aboard. It's good to see you. We were just talking a little bit ago. Good to see you, Dan. I also got a question from Brian. He says, does explicit negotiation foster genuine unity or just compliance? I don't know why we would compare those two things or think that they're mutually exclusive of each other. But what explicit negotiation does is it might not affect either one of those, but it raises awareness. So every relationship has what you call a shadow of the relationship. So humans have a shadow where we have things in our subconscious, things we don't know about ourselves, things that we don't realize that we're capable of. And it could be good or bad things. Like serial killers tend to have nice, kind things in their shadow, and some normal people tend to have murderous rage in their shadow that they would never admit that they have, but it's there. Okay. And then some people have all kinds of uh, tendencies and fetishes and stuff that they would never admit to themselves, but they're there. They just don't know about them. So shadow work is very important as an individual, but it's also very, very important for individuals, for couples, for relationships as well, because a relationship has a shadow. And whatever is a reality that is accessible to your consciousness, that is not brought out into the open, is part of the relationship's shadow. And the more that's in the shadow of the relationship, the higher the likelihood that the relationship is going to fail. Okay. I see a bunch of people uh, chiming in here. Got Josiah coming in. Good to see you. If you like what you're getting here, please support the channel. You can go to our donate page at www.beyondthefundamentals, and you can see 5 different ways to support us electronically, financially. And thanks to those who already do. Could not do this without you. That's what keeps helping make the ends meet and that sort of stuff. Remember, we're also on Twitter and Facebook, X. So you can go follow us there for notifications of when we go live, that sort of stuff. Also, we have one-on-one sessions now. If you want a one-on-one session with me, we have paid one-on-one sessions. Go to beyondthefundamentals.com and you can book a one-on-one consultation where you and I will look at your scenario and apply all the stuff we talk about on this channel to your scenario. Okay. So some things that I want to talk about right now, I could probably just turn this off and just talk to you. All right. What do I want to talk about right now? First of all, let's talk about the comment that I got from somebody was prenups ruin the spirit of the relationship. And I'm like, first of all, what is the spirit of that kind of relationship? Are you wishing things away? One of my bosses when I was in the military, he said, I was the ALOC commander. We were deployed to Iraq, and I was the S6, which is the communications officer. And for the detachment that was going back to Kuwait for our redeployment back to the United States, uh, I was the ALOC commander, which means that I was in charge of the S6 and the S1 personnel and the S4 supply and logistics for the sake of that detachment on behalf of the battalion of the advanced party, right? And so as we're going through all the wickets and everything that we have to consider before we start our journey, he said to me, "Work through everything. Don't wish anything away." And that's always stuck with me because it's a really good thing to consider. And I think people who are more immature, they like to just wish things to be a certain way, but don't ever look right at it. I remember when I was younger, I didn't want to do a budget because I don't know, I just didn't want to look at it. I didn't want to see what all the bad news was. Just didn't want to do a budget. And when I finally did start doing using a budget, it's like I got a raise. It's like, wow, now I can start telling my money where to go and what it's going to do. And I suddenly just awareness made it seem like there was more of it and there was less scarcity. So that was kind of good. So what we want to do is we want to look at everything. So are we wishing what is the spirit of the relationship? That's the question that I want to ask. If prenups ruin the spirit of the relationship, what is the spirit of the relationship that you think it's ruining? Sweeping things under the rug, hoping your partner doesn't notice something. This is denial, and it causes the relationship to exist in some kind of really a psychosis, a denial of reality, a pretend reality which probably does not exist, and the unwillingness to look at explicit negotiations has to do with insecurity and fragility. There's somebody's insecure about something, somebody's fragile about something. Maybe as a man, you are insecure about the relationship, and if we start talking about the ramifications of the termination of the relationship, maybe she will leave me. Okay. Well, if she does, you just dodged a bullet. Okay. You absolutely want that. You want that to happen, especially early in the relationship. the Now I want to talk about the word marriage for a second, because what we need to understand is the word marriage means at least two things. And we conflate them like they're all the same thing, but actually they are two things. Marriage, number one, it is legal status in the eyes of the government. It is a legal contract and changes your legal status in the eyes of the government. That's one thing. And number two, you could say it's a vow before God for a lifelong commitment. Now, those are two completely different things. They're two very completely different things. Okay. So we need to understand what these things are and what each one is. And so when we talk about prenups, what we're really talking about is or negotiations. We're trying to say the quiet part out loud. There are quiet parts to negotiations, and a lot of negotiations are implicit, and we don't say them out loud, and we don't even know that there is some kind of value being transacted. I know it sounds cold hearted to say it that way, but we don't even recognize that there is some kind of value being transacted until something doesn't happen, until something isn't going right. And that's when most people start the explicit negotiations, and those do not go well. Okay. So it's better to be more mature about it, have the explicit negotiations up front so that we know what we're getting into. Now, interestingly, there are legal organizations who are doing something that's called alt marriages. And the alt marriages are what are those? It's instead of going by the default contract of what a legal contract is, you basically get to tailor the terms of your own marriage contract. You get to specify what the terms are. What are the terms for uh, the duration, the terms on which it would end, and then what happens if it ends, and who gets what? You could specify all that instead of having it specified elsewhere. Like we said in our other video, any getting married, a marriage is already a prenup. Okay, It already accepted some person you don't know is going to decide what happens to all your stuff. Somebody also said, what about for the women? Okay. Well, that's why negotiations, because I think maybe in the other video it sounded like I was trying to help men not get raked over the coals. And women, some women are like, well, how do women stop protect ourselves? That's where you come in the negotiation too. Make the negotiation explicit so that you know what you're getting into, and don't sign up for it if it's not agreeable terms. You have every right in the world to not sign up for it. Being blind to what's going to happen to you does not make it any less likely to happen to you. Okay, so you need to be aware that it's going to happen to you. Alana says, often we cannot foresee very real struggles and we should not work through them. And what that makes me think of is that sometimes when you talk about the realities of the relationship ending prematurely, because, marriage, we say till death do us part, it comes across as an endorsement of that, like it's a good idea and people should anticipate it and try to do that. And that's not what I'm saying at all. Okay. Of course, everybody should work through their stuff. Yeah, like Josiah says, would you rather have a random person decide your prenup or yourselves? And it's just think it's contracts and there are terms of the contracts. Okay. Um, so what are some of the things you can negotiate? I was gonna do a completely different um video on this, but I'm gonna go ahead and mention it briefly here. There are roles in a relationship. Every relationship has a role. And when it comes to marriage, we tend to think of things like love and romance and not so much roles in the transaction of value, but that's the quiet part that we don't like to say, but it's there, okay? So there are roles in the relationship, and what I encourage people to do is to explicitly negotiate what your roles are. So when you get married to somebody, they've been building up their heuristics of what constitutes a marriage relationship for years and years and years. How their mom and dad do it, how their grandparents did it, TV, marriages that they saw on TV or in movies, or other people at church, people at the mall, people they know, their friends' parents. People are making up their idea of what constitutes marriage. And without us even knowing this, we are anticipating being in a role like that at some point in our lives by default. We don't even know we're doing it. And also, there's a deep part of your deep subconscious. A lot of people don't know this either, but there's a part of your deep subconscious that you are not aware of, that as soon as you encounter another person, your body is automatically probing that person for what it might be able to get in terms of wants and needs and transacted value in a transactional relationship. And it could be that anything. Maybe you're probing them to see if they want to go play catch with you, or but that's explicit, you see. So what I'm talking about are things that are subconscious and implicit. For example, when a guy encounters a girl, let's say he's just a customer at the cat at Winn-Dixie, okay, at the grocery store, and let's say that the man's a customer and the um, cashier is a woman. Now, I'm not saying the man is an animal or has no morals or values, but in his subconscious, his body is automatically geared up for what kind of value transaction might be able to transpire, or what kind of opportunity for a value transaction, including sexual opportunity, might be able to transpire based on this encounter. Now, don't get mad at the men because he can't help this and he doesn't know he's doing it and probably doesn't want to do it. It's the VR hardware set that we are in. We don't really have a choice. And at the same time, in the woman's subconscious, when she encounters men, and these are typical things, there's a typical general things in their subconscious based on how we are raised, they are evaluating for what kind of resources they can get transactions for in a potential relationship. Now, your body's doing this in your subconscious. Remember, we talked about in previous videos the 2 decks of cards, how when one deck is rigged, you don't know it in your head till, like, 80 deals, but your body knows it after just 10 deals. Talked about that. So that kind of thing is going on in interpersonal relationships all the time at the subconscious level. So what we wanna do is, like, raise our consciousness to them. So when it comes to roles in a marriage, what a lot of people do is they adopt a role, like, if you're a Christian, the man is supposed to provide, the women are supposed to guide the house. You have all the stuff from Titus 1 and 1 Timothy 3 and Proverbs 31. You have all this stuff, and then we've codified it over the years. And then in our society, we have societal expectations. You see? And so the man is the de facto mechanic and the handyman, and the woman sews and cleans up and sweeps the floor and cooks, and the man mows the yard and takes out the trash, and the woman changes the diapers. I'm just throwing out stereotypical stuff on purpose here, because what people don't realize is that stuff needs to be negotiated. Now, here, here's what you got to realize. Brother Melms, who's telling you how husbands and wives should act and what they should be doing at home, he does not live at your house. He does not live at your house. You and your spouse live in your house. Nobody else does. So you don't need Brother Melms, who's preaching the sermon on what husbands and wives should do. He doesn't have to go back to your house and put up with what the husbands and wives aren't or aren't doing. He doesn't have to put up with that. You do. So you need to explicitly negotiate what it is that you want to be doing. Okay. In some houses, the men and the boys always take out the trash. Now, in my house, the way me and Paula are, whoever finds the full trash can takes it out. It's that simple. We don't care. We don't have it divvied up like that. And she, when it comes to doing yard work outside, she actually prefers to do it. It's stereotypically a man thing to do, but she enjoys it. She likes the exercise, likes to get out there and sweat and get grass all over her shoes. And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. You see? So you start thinking about everything. Start thinking about in your relationship, how much are you behaving a certain way because you presume your role calls for it based on some authority that is outside of your house. And now realize that doesn't have to be a determining factor in your house at all. It's your house, it's your relationship. You do it how you want to do it. And you everything is negotiable. Everything is negotiable. So there are 3 phases to relationships. You write this down somewhere. There are 3 phases to relationships, and they are attraction, negotiation, and maintenance. I'm going to say that again. It's attraction, negotiation, and maintenance. Okay. The key thing to know about these 3 phases is once any phase starts, it never stops. Okay. So the attraction phase, it's not just that you're just attracted at the beginning of the relationship and then you can stop being attracted because you will likely in this society, you will stop being married too if that goes on. And then there's negotiation. Now, most often, like what kind of relationship is this? Most often, the the stated out loud explicit negotiation simply consists of the define the relationship negotiation. What are we? Are are we going steady? Are we looking to get married? Are we just wanting a pal to hang out with? Are we friends with benefits? What are we? Let's say what we are. Are we exclusive? Are we not exclusive? What is this? It's the DTR, define the relationship conversation. That is usually the most explicit thing that is negotiated in the early stages of a relationship. Now, once that conversation is had, like say, "Oh, I'd like to have an exclusive relationship," and you find agreement, or "I like to move toward marriage eventually. I'm looking for somebody to get married to." Once you define that, you'd be surprised how many role specificities are presumed because of our value structure and our upbringing in our society that we don't think we need to negotiate. But then you find out 3 weeks later, 3 years later that, wow, we think very differently about these things, and I would never cook things that way. Me and Paula have little joke arguments that we have. We have a there's a top rack on our dishwasher. It's like you can lay flat things on it. She likes to use it, and I don't because it just collects water, and you have to take the stuff out and dry it out, and sometimes the water has gritty stuff in it. And if you put anything metal up there, the water will sit on top of it and cause it to rust when it's drying everything. So it's kind of funny. She puts stuff up there. I don't like to put stuff up there, and neither one of us take it very seriously, but it's not something when we started our relationship, we didn't sit down and have a talk about how we're going to load the dishwasher. You see? So, right. Alana's saying if someone's going to write up a prenup, they should reword their vows to exclude for better or for worse. Well, which kind of marriage are we talking about? The vow before God or the legal contract? Okay, so just because in a marriage there are two people, and just because one person is all about for better or for worse, it does not mean that both people are really that committed. And just because two people say it doesn't mean it goes down that way. And so that's the problem. Aaron says, "That reminds me of the 3 rings of marriage: the engagement ring, the wedding ring, and the suffer ring." Okay, that's kind of funny. Let me look over here and see what we got going on. Somebody said a comment disappeared. I haven't deleted any comments, so I'm not sure what would cause comments to disappear. So there are 3 phases of relationship: attraction, negotiation, and maintenance. And then what this means is that in the maintenance phase, you're maintaining negotiations and you're maintaining attraction, and you have to work on those things. One of the biggest mistakes people make is like, "Oh, I'm married now. I can finally be myself." And then what they mean by "I can be myself" is, "Oh, I can just let myself go and become a slob and all this kind of stuff." And you really don't want to do that because you don't want to fail to maintain attraction. And attraction could be a variety of different things. Like with Paula, I'm attracted to a lady who is professional and educated and well spoken and that kind of thing. It's not just physical things. What else? What are the things that you're uh, attracted to? It varies from person to person, and you know what those things are. So, what else do I have in my notes here? Being in love, I would say, somebody says prenups ruin the spirit of the relationship. No, for mature people, they actually secure it. I had a I had a friend that was he worked at Marfa Res, and he got married later in life. Both he and his current wife had previous marriages, and their spouses died. They died. So they each had a house from a previous life. Well, when they got married, they lived in the same house, but they also maintained ownership of their previous houses. And the reason for this is their own reasoning, their own agreement was that I don't ever want you to be locked into this relationship because you're financially trapped in a financial prison that you can't get out of. I only want you to be here because you want to be here. And the moment comes that you don't want to be here, I don't want anything holding you back. And that's one way to look at things. So being in love, here's what you got to understand is effectively a mental impairment. Okay? It's y- y- there is a part of cognition in 4E cognition that we've talked about in our other videos. Do I have it in here? Yeah, I do have it. I do have it in this video set. In 4E cognition, part of the cognitive capacity is emotional cognition, all right? And that's actually a pretty big component of 4E cognition, of how we're making up our minds. It's not what I wanted to do. I was trying to get my little pen here and highlight this emotional part. In 4E cognition, there's this emotional part. Okay. If you were if you didn't have that, we wouldn't be able to make decisions. We think that we analyze data and make decisions all the time, but if you there's people who have surgeries and have their limbic system removed, and when they go to the grocery store, they spend all their time comparing, price per ounce and how much of various different nutrients is in there and whether or not it's good. They just can't make up their mind. They're just comparing all this data. Okay. Whereas somebody with a good limbic system intact, they're like, oh, Raisin Bran, I love that. And they pick it up off the shelf and go with it. Well, when we're married, if start scrutinizing your spouse, your potential spouse, during the negotiation phase, you could get this analysis paralysis where all you're just comparing data and data and data and data and you never move forward. Well, the emotional component where we desire each other and we're attracted to each other and we want to love each other, and that could be another discussion about what constitutes love. We want to love each other and we desire each other, and we're attracted to each other. It takes up a lot of bandwidth in our mind away from our analytical abilities. When a man loves a woman, she can do nothing wrong. Loving eyes can never see. Y'all know that song. When a man loves a woman, she can do no wrong because loving eyes can never see. And that's one of the problems when you fall in love, when you're Twitter-pated, as they say on Bambi. When you're Twitter-pated, when you're infatuated, this emotional reality in your mind takes up a lot of bandwidth so that your capacity for analysis, data analysis, kind of is diminished a lot. So it's very important to have help with some of this stuff. So people who are economically high value, like they make seven figures and stuff like that, they're going to have their lawyers involved before they're getting married anytime. Like if, let's say, Taylor Swift and Travis Kelsey get married. I mean, their lawyers are going to agree on the terms of that before they ever say I do. And it's just automatic. It's just what you do. That's the process for people like that. That's what they do. And it's not a odd thing. It's not I don't like you thing. It's just you protect your assets. You know what you're getting into. You have a lawyer advise you. What's the return on investment? What's the worst thing that can happen? How do I make that avoid from happening? Now, the magic, and when someone says, the spirit of the relationship, I get what you're saying. I get it. The magic, the chemistry, the romance, right? And this portion, the magic, chemistry, and romance portion early in the relationship, I'm not saying it can't exist later, but early in the relationship is where a narcissist or a borderline personality disorder or an ideologue, like a Calvinist or provisionist, somebody like that, can charm you right into an everlasting prison from which it seems there is no escape. Okay. So when you're getting married and you're 20 something, how well versed are you on how to spot a psychopath or a narcissist or somebody with borderline personality disorder? How trained are you to spot that? How do you know what you're getting into? And what you need to know about cluster B folks is that they're very good on the forefront of a relationship. It is fun, it's adventurous, it's charming, it's fantastic. They don't start to act up sometimes until 2 to 5 years. So you could really be in it for a good while before you realize that you just married crazy, right? So when you are Twitter-pated and you're in the moment of the magic and the chemistry and the romance, okay? All that could be amounting to a very terrible forthcoming portion of your life, which you cannot prevent. And people that are like that, especially if they're not diagnosed and aren't doing anything about it, that's just like a tornado or a hurricane. The only thing they can do is destroy everything in their path. They cannot do otherwise, and you will not be spared. That has to be considered. I want to say thanks to Aaron for the super chat. He put his comment up there this time with a super chat to make sure it gets seen. This reminds me of the three rings of marriage: the engagement ring, the wedding ring, the suffering. So so, like, at this point, Paula and I, on this channel, we've studied a good bit of psychology, and so we are what you might call amateur students. We're psychology enthusiasts, I guess, is what you would call us, psychology enthusiasts. And we have a lot of friends and colleagues who are, credentialed and all this kind of stuff. So we have quite a bit of exposure to this. And we've gotten to the point where we can spot certain kinds of personality disorders early on. And not to the point where I'm like, you have XYZ according to the DSM and you need to go get. I'm not, we're not using the information at all in that way. It's just like I know that if I were on the dating scene and encountered that person now, knowing what I know now, oh, I would steer clear of them, wouldn't come near them with a 39.5-foot pole. Stay further away from them than the Grinch. So it's just, it's something you need to know. And so when you don't know that, and when you don't know how to spot those kind of people, and you're in the middle of the magic and the chemistry and the romance and the twitterpation, okay? You don't know what's coming, and you could have hell on wheels coming your way. So we talked about the fact that emotion helps us evade analysis paralysis. Now, if a negotiation ruins the spirit of a relationship, this is in my notes here. If an explicit negotiation ruins the spirit of a relationship, what you are saying is that the relationship is 100% emotion. That's what you're saying. So a mature person would be able to recognize, hey, I love you and I want this to work out and I'm in this for life, but I also know a few things about life. Okay. And I know things could go south for any number of reasons that we can't possibly foresee. And while we all agree that we should work through them, we also know that that doesn't always happen. So the spirit of the relationship needs to not just be this magic chemistry, romance, and twitterpation and the falling in love. If that aspect of your relationship is so fragile, you're afraid to lose somebody. You're afraid that they're not going to marry me if I start talking about getting a prenup. You don't want to marry them. You don't want to marry them. You don't want to have somebody that's that fragile and that insecure and can't take an adult level explicit negotiation about what the facts really are. It's like a it's like a Calvinist. I was just having a conversation with somebody else earlier today. It's like a Calvinist preaching the Christian gospel to people, which there is no gospel in Calvinism. I know this video isn't about that thing, but when they don't mention their stuff on election and double predestination, when they don't mention those things and the fact that Christ may not have died for you anyway, when they don't mention those things and just go on with the death, burial, and resurrection of Christ, and God loves you enough to send Christ to die for you and all that kind of stuff, that it's this it's a deception. It's effectively a deception. There's non-disclosure going on. So it's almost like a complicit non-disclosure that people are agreeing to when they don't negotiate specifically what the terms of the relationship are. Brian says my wife's dad wanted me to sign a prenup and never happened, but I would have. I wasn't offended. I was marrying up. And I know people right now, especially the older people are, the more they get it and the more they're okay with it and don't feel offended or slighted by this kind of thing. So the 3 phases of relationships are attraction, negotiation, and maintenance, and as they keep going, the attraction and the negotiation need to be monitored on purpose, and the negotiation, if you should be proactive about this, and you need to negotiate the small things, okay? Now, Jordan Peterson's pretty good about this in his second book on 12 rules, the second one. He talks about relationships and negotiating small things. And it's the little small things that don't we don't think it's important, like the kind of plates you want to eat on every day. You don't think that plates aren't that big important. It's not a huge decision. But if you have to do it every day, maybe you need to negotiate that. I don't like these plates. I want some different ones. Paula and I actually had an explicit negotiation about how to greet each other every day. And this was also prompted in part by um, a discussion with Jordan Peter or reading Jordan Peterson's material. Sometimes I would do something boneheaded, like sometimes I'm a creature of habit, so I might forget to close the external garage door. Probably shouldn't say this on YouTube out here, but I would forget to do something like closing the external garage door. And then and then she would come home while I'm gone because we're staggered and are coming and leaving. And then she would come home, and then when I got home, she would just hit me with, guess what I found? I found the garage door open today, and then I had to go. It made me feel insecure, and I had to go look around. And so I had to negotiate, like, yeah, I should close the garage door, and I'm sorry about that, but coming home is something that happens every day, and we need to get this right. So when we greet each other, let's make our greetings pleasant. And then if there's something we want to talk about, let's talk about it afterward. But let's have pleasant greetings every time we encounter each other. I don't want to hear about the garage door when I come home. That kind of thing. So we negotiated it. And it's wonderful. And it's not fake or anything like that, but we explicitly negotiated how we want our greetings to go when we haven't seen each other for a few hours and we re-encounter each other. Want our greetings to be good, solid greetings that represent the deepest ways that we feel about each other. And then if there's something else we need to discuss, we'll do that afterward. But get the greeting right. So you can negotiate pretty much anything you want to negotiate. And I agree with Jordan Peterson that you should negotiate small things and negotiate them often. You'd much rather have a small little tense discussion every once in a while, maybe a few times a week, rather than a big blow up in 15 years. So, ongoing maintenance on the discussion. What else do I have in my notes here? The things we don't like to look at on paper can actually enhance the romance in a relationship for a mature couple. Pulling them out and seeing them, not wondering. Me and Paula talked about this too. Some of these comments actually come from a discussion that I had with her about this topic. Like, when you don't know what might hit you later, it kind of can leave you with a feeling of anxiety, like you don't know what's coming. And then that anxiety builds over time. You might not even know what's causing it. But the more things that you can make explicit, the less anxiety you'll have about things you don't know that are coming your way. Okay. The next note that I have here is secure attachment styles are more capable and willing to have negotiations about value transactions. Secure attachment styles. So there's a lot of good literature about different attachment styles, attachment orders, and attachment disorders. And they mean, so I'd recommend familiarity with those things. The more secure attachment style. So if somebody is unwilling to have an explicit negotiation, it could be that they have an insecure attachment style. Okay. They have a fragile attachment style. They have a fear of abandonment or something like that, or a trauma bond. There could be all kinds of reasons, but a secure attachment style is more capable and willing to have explicit negotiations about value transactions. Um, I have this comment here, and these notes I just kind of threw together. I have the phrase "not approval seeking" and "forthright and direct." I'm trying to get back in my head of what was going through my mind at the time. So I know husbands and wives, especially husbands do this, I think, more than wives do, but because, or at least some of the examples that I know of, a husband is more interested in maintaining interactive approval from his wife, who may be making it difficult to have sustained approval from her. And so instead of negotiating for what he wants, he winds up acting in a way to get to be seeking approval. He needs validation from her, wants validation from her. And the more he stays in this mode, the more he puts off what he wants and what he needs in the relationship. And then that's going to build up resentment over time that's probably just going to blow up later. So, what else do I have here? Yeah, I think that's what I got. I went through all my notes here. So, in summary, so that's a good point too. Um, that Alon's bringing up. Age is another pretty huge factor in this. I got married at 22 and we built a life together. If I was a widow and remarried a rich man in my 60s, I think it'd be easier to let him keep. And that does make sense. So, one of the analogies that people use for this, there's a guy in college and he was headed places and he's trying to date these girls. And when it comes to women, what they're attracted to, women usually move up with regard to their standard of living. And so this woman's last boyfriend had his own apartment instead of living on the dorm. So she saw that as a move down in the standard of living. But anyway, this guy was not he wasn't able to secure a long-term relationship when he was in college getting his degree and all this, but then he later became very, very successful. And now these same women are coming back wanting to jump on the train now. And it's just like with a business. If you get in at the founding level and you're a partner, well, then you share in the shares and the stakeholder and all that. And if you've been, you get married young and you build your little empire together, it's yours together. You built it together. You're there for each other. But if you're going to be rejected all your life and then they suddenly are interested after you built your own empire, well, it's just like with a company that did that. If you come wanting to work with the company, then you're just gonna be an employee with a salary. You're not gonna be a partner at that point. That some people compare romantic relationships with business relationships, and there's this statement, "Whatever works in business works in relationships." Well, you take that for what it's worth. So we talked about the spirit of the relationship and how we don't want to be too emotional and be sweeping things under the rug that we probably need to pull out into the open. And prenups are for mature people with secure attachment styles, and we are basically mentally impaired at the beginning of relationships where the magic chemistry, the romance, and the twitterpation kind of makes us vulnerable to somebody, especially somebody who has nefarious intentions or they're a really good charmer or have a personality disorder. They can really take your life and take it in a direction you don't want to go. We talked about what the meaning of the word marriage means and how we conflate these things. In one sense, it's like a vow before God for a lifelong commitment to somebody, but in the other sense, it is it is a legal status, a legal contract with your state government. And those two things are two very different things, and we use the same word for both of them. We should probably use a different word for them. And I encourage people to look into the concept. If you're not married yet, look into the concept of what's being called alt marriages, where instead of just going with the state predefined specifications of what constitutes a marriage and what happens at the end of it, if it ends undesirably or that sort of thing, you set your own terms. You tailor it to your own needs and wants and desires according to your own negotiations. So I'd encourage people to look into those things as well. We talked about role negotiation, how you don't want to just let society or your church's values negotiate the roles that you play inside your house because they're not in your house. You are in your house. So you negotiate with your spouse the things that you want and need and like to do and want to do and are willing to do. And then they negotiate those, and they may not fit the stereotypical roles that a church or a society would expect, and that's perfectly okay because neither the governor nor Brother Melms has to come live at your house, and you do. So you make it like you want it so that you're happy with it. Okay. Things not going your way is not going to give Brother Melms resentment. It's going to give you resentment. So you need to get that squared away and have those things negotiated to so that they are how you guys like them as your own individual cuppy couple. That's funny. And then we talked about how the relationship has 3 phases. You have attraction, negotiation, and maintenance. And once a phase starts, it does not stop. The most explicit negotiation is define the relationship, but we need to keep having explicit negotiations throughout the relationship. And it's better to negotiate when they're small rather than when they're big. Don't wait till things get out of hand or you've been carrying resentment around about that painting on the wall for 10 years before you say anything about it. Um, yeah, I think that's it. I'm gonna look at some comments now, and we're gonna go ahead and then wrap up this live session. Yeah, it just feels like a way out, like wanting to have a natural childbirth, but don't worry, we have epidural if you change your mind. Yeah, I can see how it feels like that. And also we have a lot of thought inertia about what we think marriage should be. What I'm trying is here's another question that I want to bring up for people. Like we Christians are not very good at being pragmatic. We're not very effective, okay? Just like with COINTELPRO, we're being made to feel virtuous, righteous, and moral for believing certain things, but we are not very good at asking about what's effective. What's effective? And there's a lot of men especially. So you'd have to ask effective toward what? That's the question. Toward what you want. So there's a lot of men, especially, who are not very good at being able to just state what they want, even to themselves. What do you want? I don't even know what I want. What do I want? That's a really good question. You can't negotiate for what you want or what you need if you don't even know what you want or what you need. What got me talking about this? S- so if you're in a relationship with somebody and you don't even know yourself to the point where what your own needs and wants are, can't even state what you need, you're setting both of you up for problems coming in later, and especially Christian men coming from. So here's what happens is the big blow up happens. Women, and I don't mean this in a pejorative way. I mean this. I'm going to use the word selfish here, but women have better practice at being healthfully selfish. You need to be somewhat selfish in your life. You need to take care of yourself. You need to learn how to spoil yourself from time to time, let yourself enjoy some good things. And what often happens to a man, especially a Christian man or any kind of conscientious man at all, he will spend his early youth in service. He gets married, he's service to his wife, service to his job, and service to his kids. And he's like, he's got this duty thing, and he feels righteous, moral, and all this kind of stuff for doing all this stuff. But then suddenly he's 42 and he's not enjoying life at all. So then he starts making all these rash decisions. So instead of healthfully practicing how to maturely be selfish in small doses throughout his life, he basically stopped being selfish altogether. He's very good at delayed gratification, so he stopped being selfish altogether back around age 15 or so. So when he goes to start being selfish again, he can't do it in small little healthful increments. He goes back and does it like a 15-year-old, but now with the income of a 42-year-old. So he's going to go buy a flashy car, ditch his wife, get the hot girl, going to go through a midlife crisis, okay? Because he didn't practice being selfish in healthy doses. So when I say we don't what question we don't ask ourselves a lot, especially Christians, we're always asking what's right, what's virtuous, what's moral, what does God want? We're good at asking those questions, but we're not good at asking the question what's effective. And then that would beg another question, effective to do what? Well, you need to know what you need and what you want. And what is effective to get you what you need and what you want. And you just start asking that question. We Christians are not very good at asking that question. How do I be effective? What's pragmatic? What are you trying to do? What do you need? What do you want? What's pragmatic? We're not very good at asking that question. How can I be effective? How can I be pragmatically effective? Instead, we're asking questions like, how do I be righteous, moral, and virtuous? So now we don't know. So, okay, how do I stay married and be happy? We're not good at answering that question. So the divorce rate's going up, and I know every time you talk about the divorce rates, somebody's in the comments saying, "Oh, the divorce rates are wrong." Divorce rates, divorce rates aren't good. Okay, just anecdotally, they're not good. Okay, a lot less people are getting married now. Some divorce rates are going down in some demographics because fewer people are getting married to start with. After all, the number one cause of divorce is marriage. So we're not very good at asking this question, and so I think marriages are failing because we know that we should keep the marriage together, but we don't know how to navigate the things that we encounter in those relationships, or how to choose a good partner, or how to negotiate. We don't know these things. We don't know how to do these things. How can I be effective at negotiating and getting enough of what I want and what I need so that I'm not building up resentment that's going to blow up in 10 to 15 years? So we just start asking that question. And I think that if we got better at Christians is figuring out how to be more pragmatically effective at the things that we value, I think divorce rates would go down, and that a lot of the things that we value would last longer and happen as we wish they would. We don't have a problem with like knowing what's right or wishing things would go a certain way. We have a problem with effectively making them turn out that way. And that is a problem. And even if you don't get a prenup for whatever reason, um, negotiations, healthy, explicit negotiations all along the way about your relationship. Yeah. Alana says, I'm at the point where I'm seeing people my age getting divorced, where before no one was. It's the season of life they've reached. So yeah, I'm trying to poll quickly the people that I know and hang out with, and those that are. I just met one couple a few weeks ago, actually at the beginning of October. I met a couple who they've been married for 20 years. I know, actually, yeah, I know a few, but the majority of couples that I know are at least on number 2 by now. The majority, the ones that I personally know. Christian, non-Christian, all the things, doesn't matter. So, yeah, there's so much to it, so much to it. Anyway, the deal is, like my professor at the University of Mobile said, I asked him one time, I was ideologically possessed, independent fundamental Baptist, you know, all those beliefs about divorce and remarriage. And we had our first time, husband and one wife meant that you could not be divorced and remarried and be a pastor, all that kind of stuff, had all that kind of stuff going. So I asked my professor what he thought about divorce, and he said the best, and this guy's a Calvinist too, like a 2-point Calvinist, but still, which doesn't make sense. I know it's not consistent. But anyway, he said one of the wisest thing you could possibly say, and he's about 62, 63 at the time that I asked him this. I said, "What's your opinion on divorce?" And his immediate answer, well, he paused just for a second and he goes, "Well, it happens." And that's it. That's really the only answer there is. That's the answer. No matter what we think about the virtue of what happens is one thing, but the fact is it happens. And so you can either be prepared for it or not. And to enter into a relationship while denying the reality that it happens is naive in my opinion. And so, yeah, John makes a really good point here. The culture, state, and religious institutions have made marriage nearly unwise. I would say completely unwise. If you talk to a guy who, especially a guy who's a high earner, we're talking high 6 figures or more, and you ask them, and they're not in a romantic relationship right now, you ask them if they want to get married, they're going to look at you like, why would I get married? Why would I do that? What's the point of that? Now, maybe they want kids, all that kind of thing. But if you just ask somebody who's in society, they're not particularly Christian or anti-Christian, they're just a person. Um, we tend to look at people crazy, like, "Oh, why wouldn't you get married?" Everybody and people are getting married, they don't even know why they're doing it. But if you think everything through, and especially for people who um, earn high incomes, men or women, or who have high optionality, men or women, when you ask them, when people talk about getting married, that's when we should look at them crazy. That's that maybe that's when we should be like, "Why? Why are you doing that?" Maybe shift the culture a little bit. And I'm not saying they shouldn't, I'm just saying we need to think about what we're doing here. And what kind of married are you getting? Are you getting a legal contract with the state government, or are you making a vow before God for a lifelong commitment? And in either case, it's always a good question to ask why. Why are you doing that? Ask the question. Let me see what other comments that we have here. I would disagree with that statement. Not John's that I have up there, but some of these are short-sighted statements. I haven't thought things through. It's not about being in love with the money in that sense. A lot of things about relationships that are not, it's almost like quantum physics. There's a lot of things about relationships that are not very intuitive to us. We have a romance comedy concept of relationships that is not realistic, and there are a lot of realities about relationship that need to be addressed, and one of the things we're going to try to do is try to address some of them on this channel. All right, we're going to wrap this up. We've been doing this for about an hour, and I think that's enough for today. And I hope this gave some folks a little more to think about. Now, remember, the goal of this isn't to agree with me. Okay. The goal of this is to have some of these thoughts rattling around in your head for a while. So when you start talking to your kids before they get married, or anybody you know that's not married yet, or anybody that is married, just start thinking about these kinds of things, about their relationships. Be intentional about your relationships. And why are you having this relationship? What's the point? If you like this kind of stuff, please support the channel. This QR code will take you to the donate page of beyondthefundamentals.com, where you can donate in 5 different ways to your fancy. And if none of those work, shoot me an email and we'll work something else out if you still want to support. And we also have paid consultations, one-on-one sessions available if you want to have an hour of a session to deal specifically with your scenario. You can sign up for that at beyondthefundamentals.com. Scroll down to where it says book a one-on-one consultation, and we will get it scheduled as soon as we see that. All right, guys. Thanks for watching. May the Lord bless you and good day.